Okay, so now we're ready to move on to step 2 of our braiding project, and this is going to be braiding with beads, and all of these samples and the one that I'm wearing are all Kumihimo braids that have been made with beads. Whenever I use beads in a braid, I always use this product, which is Superlon, and this is the number 18, or the Tex 210 is what they call it. And I'm going to be making a bracelet today, so what I've done is I've pulled 4 1-yard pieces of Superlon. Now, I like to use check seed beads when I'm starting with this just because they're pretty easy to transfer. So what I've done is I've tied a stopper bead in the end of one of my pieces of Eslon, and I'm using a big eye needle. And for those of you who don't know what that is, that's a needle that almost the entire needle is big eye. And what that lets me do now is just take one of these strands of beads, and I can lay it flat, and I can just run this needle right up this wire, and I can transfer 4 or 5 inches of beads in one fell swoop. And I'm just going to pull that out of there. Just push these down. Now, for some information on how many beads, there are a couple of good rules of thumb, and that's pretty much the size bead that you're using is what you need per inch. So if I'm using a size 6 bead, I will need 6 beads to the inch on all 8 of my warps. So if I have 8 warps and I need 6 beads to the inch, that means I need 48 beads to the inch. So now what I've done is I've transferred, that's probably about 60 beads. I would count them out if I were actually making a project for real. And what I'm going to do is take this off, and I'm going to slide the bead to the other end. And I'm going to tie a stopper bead in this end as well. And then what I'll do is slide half of the beads from one side to the other, and that will give me 2 warps. So by loading beads on just one piece of Superlon, but by loading double the needs of the number of beads that I need and just sliding them, when I fold this in half to start my braid, I have 2 warps. Now it's a little bit different when you're adding your bobbins, when you have beads on. So let me show you how you do that. Everything else is the same setup as the other board, but this one, what I'm going to do is start by winding a little bit of thread with no beads. Then I'm going to slide a few beads into the bobbin and wind a little bit more thread with no beads and put some more beads in the bobbin. And then I'm going to leave, I don't know, looks like maybe 6 or 7 or 8 beads out of the bobbin. So this is what this braid is going to look like when I start. I've got my 4 sets of 2. And in this case, since I'm using the same bead on all 8 warps, it doesn't matter where I put my color placement. And I need to work about a 1/2 or a 1/4 inch of braid with no beads. And that's because I need room to put my caps on. So I'm just going to work, my left stays left and my right stays right without any beads at all for about a 1/4 of an inch. And that's about 16 or 18 total passes. You'll find that this goes fairly quickly. Now it's important to remember that if you work your right hand with your right and the left warp with your left and keep that finger underneath and get that downward tension, that it will keep this Superlon in place. Because the Superlon is more narrow, it's a lighter weight textile than the rat tail, it has a tendency to want to ride up. So you want to make sure that you keep your tension so that all of these warps stay nice and tight and flat against the board surface as you're working them. And a lot of times you'll see that I'm putting my thumb part way across the board, and that also helps me keep those warps nice and tight and keep them from riding up and getting a little bit too loose. Okay, now I have about a 1/4 of an inch made. It's time for me to start putting the beads in. I'm going to be dropping my beads into the structure of the braid 1 bead at a time. This is a hollow braid. Now, this is my left low, so it's getting ready to cross the board. What I have to do is make sure that when I drop the bead into the hole, that it stays underneath the first of the 2 warps that it's going to cross. So again, this one is going to be crossing these 2. It needs to go under the first one, so I'm just going to slide that bead into the hole and just tuck it under that first one. And that's keeping my left in the left. Now I have to bring my right one back on the right and do the same thing. Slide 1 bead into the hole and just tuck it under that first of the 2 that it crosses. Bring it to its home position and give it a turn. So you're still keeping your left on the left and the right on the right. You're just dropping a bead into the hole at each point. So again, the bead drops in, it tucks under the first of the 2 that it's crossing, and then you just do it the same way, coming down here. Drop the bead into the hole, tuck it under, just slide the bead into the hole, tuck it under, and keep on going. Now, once I've made as much beaded braid as I want, I have to end it with no beads as well, because again, what I'm going to have to do is whip and cut this in order to be able to put the end caps on, and that'll be the same process as what we did with the other braid. We'll just glue the end caps on, put on our jump rings, put on whatever our toggle or our closure is, but it's the exact same process. It's just make sure you make a little bit without beads and end it with a little bit without beads, and that's all there is.